feel very strongly about this. I want to kind of talk a little bit about ancestor answers, questions from my ancestors, ancestral questions and answers that we can look at. Because as we think about a lot of the things that we talk about in this channel and a lot of things we've been talking about in general, a lot of it has to do with applying things to us today. So there's a lot of things that I can come out to with a lot of information with respect to ancient Kemet, ancient Kush, and there are many, many millions of things that we can talk about. But I think one of the most important things we can talk about is how do we apply our ancestral knowledge today? And let's face it, a lot of people are having difficult challenges. People are thinking about the election that took place. They're thinking about Trump winning. They're thinking about, really in some respects, actually grieving, actually being in situations where they feel like, things are difficult and we're grieving. This is a bad thing that's happened. And, we have to associate with ourselves and we have to deal with this thing that actually makes us feel bad. And I know of people that I know and even, children I've seen and people that I've talked to who actually feel negative and bad about these things. And I want to talk about it because I think we have some answers from my ancestors. And I think we can talk about it. And I think about people like Sojourner Truth. I think about people from ancient Kemet and ancient Kush. And what was the rock that they had? What was the commonality that they had? Because certainly they faced challenges. And, when I think about it, I think the divine concept of who you are is a significant part of what makes you centered when things seem to go wrong. And at the end of the day, sometimes you can't control what happens. You can't stop bad things from happening. She certainly had a lot of incredible and unfair things happen in her life. You can't always stop bad things from happening. You can't always stop bad and unfair things from happening, but you can always determine how you're going to respond to it. You can always determine what your response is going to be. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you for joining. You can determine how people are going to react to you and what you're going to do about it. And I think that's the center of how we've been successful as a people, that our power is not just in the opulence and the things you see. We see a lot of things and we think the glory is in the material things. And that's never where the power was. When you look at our ancestors and you look what people took into place, the power was not just in the ancestors. It was just in the opulence and the merit. The power was in people. It was in the people themselves, not just in something specific. It was in the people themselves. So as I think about that, and I think about people like Sojourner Truth, it strikes me that a lot of our people, even our young people who are trying to deal with this and the heartbreak of it happening and the challenge of it happening, right? Because a lot of people have gone through some very bad things. A lot of people nowadays, we don't have a way to cope. We don't have a way to deal with life challenges when it comes to us and it upsets us or it takes us off guard. And I think that's where our ancestors come in. And I think the thing that we run away from a lot of times when it comes to African American history and African history in general is the spirituality of it. I think we run away from that. I think we talk a lot about, nowadays it's almost as if we've grown up. We've grown up to the point where we can talk about politics as being power and money as being power. And we really actually look at people because they have an economic, wherewithal. And we think that person has power because they have economics. We actually look at people back in the day like Mansa Musa and say, well, he was the richest man in the world to ever live. And we are sparkling and excited about the gold. And we don't even remember and we forget how they were able to do the things that they were able to do. It's not just that they did them, it's how they were able to do them. And as I think about, various things, I think about people like the Kushite people. You see the Kushite family here from the new Kush, if you will, the re-rise of Kush, who ended up developing a society that lasted for over 1,000 years after the society had already lasted for over 1,000 years prior to this. We're talking about people who developed societies and families and familial success time after time, year after year, who dealt with difficult challenges. How did they do that? And I think it's time for us to kind of look back excuse me, kind of jump into what what our ancestors were doing and what they were talking about, because at the end of the day, your purpose, who you are, your purpose, your prayer, and your divinity are the center of the things that make people great. When we think about people like Harriet Tubman, we think about Sojourner Truth, we think about Frederick Douglass, we think about Malcolm X, we think about Martin Luther King, we think about many, many people. We think about Amani Reines, Kushta, we think about Kashta, we think about, wonderful things in ancient Kemet and in the teachings of Amenhotep. We understand, you start to see that It was our ancestors' ability to see the divine connected to them, to not be swayed by what's happening on the outside. There's a story about Sojourner Truth, and Sojourner Truth died in November. And so this is kind of the anniversary, if you will, and this month is the anniversary of her death. And there's a time where you probably know the story where her son, her 5-year-old son, had been sold away into slavery after she had walked away and left her in place of enslavement in New York. Her son was sold to someone else and eventually sold into Alabama. And she never knew if she would see her son again. And she said she prayed. Now, here's a woman who never owned a dollar in her life, didn't have a pair of shoes. She literally walked away from slavery with the one child she could take with her. And one of her sons, one of her children, was sold into Alabama at a time when gradual emancipation was taking place in New York. And she knew that if she didn't do something, her child might not ever be free. So here she was in the 1820s with no money, nothing but prayer in her heart. And she went about, she went about the situation of putting prayer in herself, putting prayer in her heart, and being able to have a connection with God. And she said, God, I prayed to you, and I asked you that you would deliver my son. And she went about the town where she was at in New York, finding people, working with lawyers, working with judges, never having been in a courthouse in her life, knowing that, however, the law said that if her son was sold away, that was possibly not what was supposed to be done, and that her son needed to be back in the state of New York, fighting with people, arguing with people, getting to the point where she was getting money and people helped her, getting to the point where she was able to hire a bounty hunter, and to the point where they were able to get her son back. And once they got her son back, eventually from the horrible man who had taken him and had beaten and abused her son, they told her, well, he's back in New York. He's out of Alabama. We got him back here, but you're going to have to wait another couple months because the court dockets are not up again. And it'll be another couple months before you can even have the court case heard for your son. And she said, God, you told me I would have my son now. I would have my son today, and that I wouldn't have to wait. This whole idea of waiting in court dockets and these supposed powers that are quote unquote outside of I don't care about it. You told me I'd have my son today. And so she prayed, and she was walking around in New York and upstate New York, and someone saw her praying. They knew of her case. They heard her because she was obviously, making some noise in the town. And they said, there's a man over there named a man. You go over here to him. He may be able to help you get your son back very shortly. So she went to the man, and the man told her, you know what? If you can give me $5, I can find someone who will get your son back within 24 hours. He'll go get him, and we'll have this court case. And so she had never, as I said, owned money in her life. She went to people who were Quakers and helped her out. She was able to raise more than the $5. She gave the entire amount to the man. She didn't keep any for herself. People asked her, why didn't you keep the money for yourself? At least the amount over $5. She said, if $5 would get my son, more than $5 would surely get him. I'll give the man everything he needs to go get this done. Her son was found. He was taken to the court that day, that night, and she was able to go see her son in what was a horrible situation where he had been beaten and the man was telling him to lie. And the judge finally said, you know what? This son has no caretaker, nobody to take care of him but his mother. He released her son, and she was able to get her son back in a remarkable way in an immediate period of time when nobody thought she can do that. The point that I'm making is that our ancestors had a faith. They not just had faith, they had a relationship with God. They had a prayer with God. And when you think about ancient Kemetic religion, ancient Kemetic spirituality, ancient Kushite religion and spirituality, they are talking words of power. They are doing hekau. They are consistently talking with God. They're consistently understanding their place in their relationship to God. And they consistently understand that there's male and female aspects of God, male and female expressions of God, that everywhere you look, there is divinity. And so when you think about that, we nowadays somehow think that we look back at somebody like a Sojourner Truth or a Harriet Tubman, who I can tell similar stories about, or, people that we marvel at wonderful things like this gentleman here and his depiction and what he looked like. And we stop short of saying, how did they do what they did? They had a connection with the divine. They had a connection with power. And I know a lot of times we might think that we're in this century and we don't have to look back at things in that way and we don't have to do things. And then Sojourner Truth was in Morocco, but maybe that was a simplistic way of looking at things. Our ancestors are telling us that the power, the way in which they built civilization to begin with, is the way in which we're going to build it now. It's the way in which we're going to deal with our challenges now. When you see something like what happened with Trump and the election and things, Trump getting elected, that shouldn't unnerve you. That shouldn't make you upset. It should make you understand that you have a challenge, and there's a challenge we rise to meet. And we rise to meet it on the backs of our ancestors. We rise to meet it in the ways in which they've taught us to meet it, right? That's not something that makes us, grieve in a way that we can't deal with it, in the way that we can't cope. If there are any group of people in the history of the world, specifically in the modern history of the world, who have been able to organize and get together, it's Black women and it's Black people. And the idea that we may not be able to make this challenge is, I think, taking us away from the real call of the day, the real call of the hour. And that's for us to get back to the ways of our ancestors. And the thing about it is, because you're practicing or looking at how your ancestors laid the way, does that mean that you also are not interested in politics? People try to do silly things. Don't even pay attention to that. You don't, that's just ridiculous, right? You are someone who understands the power that's within you, someone who's connected with God, understands the divinity. So you're not shaky. You understand, I am a child of God. I am an expression of God. These things don't stop me. These things don't stop me, and whether you're looking at somebody, I don't care if you're looking at a basketball player. LeBron James is not the most powerful person in the world. Beyonce or a rapper or something, they're not the most powerful people in the world. You are. They're not the most powerful people in the world because they have money, or because they sold drugs, or because they did a movie, or because they play basketball. That's not what makes them powerful. We have to stop thinking everything that glitters is gold. That's really what gold is. That's really what power is. We have it, and as a part of this kind of election, a lot of people rolled out. A lot of people who were of stature, who had a lot of monetary and material things, spoke out. But that doesn't mean you have power. Our ancestors actually said that your prayer, your words of power, your connection with God, that is your power. That's the source of power. You can look at all the Kemetic documents, and there are a lot of people here who look at this, and we talk about Kemet a lot in ancient Kush. They're all telling you that your connection with God is what gives you power. They're not praising the buildings. The buildings are filled with praises of God. They're filled with adoration and understanding of themselves as divinity and as expressions of God, understanding their family as expressions of God, understanding their connection, understanding your purpose. When you put prayer and purpose and your divinity together, you have a combination that's unstoppable. And when I think about Aset, and I think about Sojourner Truth, she to me is Aset. And we've talked about the Asarian Tale a lot. We've talked about ancient Kemet and a lot of things. God bless you, Athera. Thank you so much for joining, Cartwright. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. Thank you so much to you as well. We think about Aset. I've talked a lot about Aset and Asar and the Asarian Tale, and the idea that these are all aspects of you, that the divinity that is Asar, who was the king of ancient Kemet and who was the rightful ruler, if you will, that being a divine expression of yourself. And Aset, I believe, is that aspect of yourself that is discipline, that is divinity. When you have divinity married to discipline, there's nothing that can stop you. Aset was someone who was considered to be a perfect prayer. When you think about ancient Kemet, they talk about words of power or secret words, and people will use mantras and use words today like Ong, and they use words of that nature, words that will help you meditate, help you kind of forget what's going on in life, and allow you to kind of circle yourself and center yourself inside and really kind of focus on yourself spiritually, let your spiritual take over. A lot of that was talked about in ancient Kemet, and Aset was considered to be, from a Kemetic standpoint, and you read a lot of the literature about Aset, the figure Aset, a perfect prayer. Someone who hit the notes perfectly, someone who could identify with God through prayer, that no one could stop her. If you look at almost all of the documentation with respect to Aset, even when you talk about knowing the names of Ra, there is a documentation with respect to Aset where they talk about Aset being able to find out more so than anybody else the secret names of God. That Aset in her power was able to find out the secret names of God. In the Heru versus Set, which I've talked about here and I'll talk about again, there's a whole tale of Heru fighting Set. And in this Heru versus Set fight, Set is so powerful. He's Asar's brother who wants to take over the throne after he kills Asar. He's Asar's brother. Aset is so powerful in this tale, this ancient Kemetic tale, that he threatens to kill all of the other deities. He said, I'll kill a deity a day with my huge, weapon that I have. That's how I'm the one that's stopping the foreigners from coming in your land. I'm the one who's protecting this area, and I should be in charge because of my strength, not this little, babe whose breath still smells bad, Heru. He should not be in charge. In that whole tale, Set threatens other deities, but it is Aset. It is the woman. It's the woman who has perfect prayer, the woman who has perfect power in prayer, who is able to bind him. He is able to defeat everyone except for Set, to the point where he says, I can't have a fair trial. I can't have a fair hearing with her in the room. She has to leave. And at the end, because I can't be heard fair. This is not going to take place because her words were too powerful. He had to leave from her. And even at the end, when Set was declared to be wrong by the tribunal and by the deities, the deity, the Lord of all gods, if you will, comes to Set and says, go get him. Set, go get Set and bring him back in binds, like in chains, bring him back tied up. And she does. And every time you hear the idea of discipline, the idea of divinity, the idea of perfect prayer, the idea of mantras, it's associated with Set, and it's associated with a woman. And I think about, for me, Sojourner Truth embodies Set in the way she was disciplined to let nothing stop her. Even when the court people were saying it and the lawyers, and she was not fazed by the courts. Even when they were telling her she would have to wait months, she said, no, God said I will have my son today. Not months from now. God said immediately. She was not fazed. To me, she was like that discipline that is a mother that has in her power and in her heart what her purpose is and lets nothing stop her, like Set did when Set went to bring her husband's body back together and to protect her son as they were about to fight Set in the major bow and the Saurian tell. You find this idea of prayer, this idea of connect with God, this idea of mantras central to African American, ancient Kemetic, ancient Kushite way of thought and religion. Yet today we divorce ourselves from that. We think that somehow power is in something outside of it. You exercise your right in all ways. You absolutely should exercise your right to vote. You absolutely should exercise your right to handle yourself economically and health-wise and to manage your family. You absolutely have to do all these things. This is a part of life, right? This is what humans do. This is a part of life, but it needs to be connected with divinity. We need to understand what real power is and not to be mistaken by it because we're looking at something material. And I think about that because as we start thinking about, God bless you, thank you so much. I think about that because as we think about these things and we think about things like the election or the loss of a loved one. I have someone in my family who's going through a lot right now, and it's challenging and it's difficult. The loss of a marriage, right? The breaking up, the challenges that you feel in your career. I mean, there are people who did many, many, many challenging things, who faced many challenging things, and our ancestors got through it with triumph. You can't always stop and change what happens to your life, but you can determine how you handle it and whether or not you rise above it. November is also the anniversary of the horrible thing that happened in 1898 in Wilmington, in North Carolina, when literally, and I've written about this and I could put some links down below, literally where there was organized effort on the part of Southern Democrats, Southern race people who were trying to basically overthrow the Republican vote and overthrow the black vote that was in Wilmington. Obviously, at the time, you would have the blacks on that side, and you had a situation where people were run out of town, where they were lynched, where the African American newspaper was burned, where people were killed over, as you know, period of days, right? And we're talking people who face lynching, who face mobs, who face their houses being burned, who faced being killed, who faced being humiliated, who faced their homes being attacked, their churches being attacked, guns and automatic like Gatling guns and things of that turned on them, who faced all kinds of crazy things, and in that craziness found a way to cope. In that craziness, found a way to pass on to you and I a better life, found a way to pass on to you and I faith, found a way to pass on to you and I hope. And I think that as we deal with these challenging things, even with things that are happening in 2024, things that are happening with election and things of that nature, that we do not allow this to separate ourselves from our coping mechanisms, from our sanity, from our peace. Because, yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I don't know why we think that we're not going to have a challenge. I don't know why we think that we're not supposed to be. I think some people really think that if we just dance and we just play around with it, that I don't know why we think that. Coretta Scott King always said that each generation has to fight its own battles. Every generation will have to fight its battle for freedom. Coretta Scott King said something to that respect. And it's almost as if, I see people and I've watched a lot of people online. It's almost as if people think that if we talk about news and if we talk about politics and if we bring somebody with money on, that's going to be the key. And our ancestors are yelling, no. That's not it. It's not that you won't handle money. I mean, there was plenty of resources in ancient Kush. I mean, they had gold literally flowing through their area. There was plenty of resources there. But our ancestors are yelling, no. You got to understand who you are and whose you are, and that morality is tied to your purpose. We think people can be leaders and not be moral. We think that the only thing that makes you a leader is if you have money. And that's absolutely wrong, and that's absolutely dangerous. And I think that it's time for us to kind of peel back the onion. And I'd love to hear what you think. Please put your comments down below. Let me know what you think. To kind of peel back this whole veil and peel back the onion, so to speak, and say, what were our ancestors really doing? A lot of people talk about African history and African consciousness, but we don't talk about what they were actually. Sometimes people who might even be from the continent don't even do it anymore. They're turning over a leaf to try to do things more European and leaving their own places behind. And we're just keeping the music and the beat with no message. Our ancestors weren't singing about things. They had rhythm. They had wonderful musical talent, but they were singing about things with a purpose. And a lot of times their music, especially back in ancient Kush and ancient Kemet, was a connection. It was a way to connect with God. It was a way to kind of drown out all the other things and let your spirit come forth. That's where your answers come from. And it's not a joke. It's not a plaything. It's not something that's just, out there willingly. It's actually real. She actually went through life with faith. She actually went through life with prayer. You can go back and look at Khufu. You can look at Sahure. You can look at Hatshepsut. You can look at the land of Punt. You can look at Amani Renis. You can look at Kashta. You can look at King Taharka. You can look at King Shabaka. You can look at all these people, and you will find them leading their lives of prayer, leading their lives, and they were able to develop civilizations that lasted a lot longer than ours. They were able not only to develop civilizations, but families that stayed intact, that were successful time after time again by the practices they were giving them. It's time we peel back the onion, and we say to ourselves, it's not just politics. You interact, obviously you do. You should. It's every part of human activity, but it's not just politics. That's power. It's not gold. It's not because you sing. You see somebody who sing. A lot of times we accept, and I'll just say it, and you can tell me what you think. A lot of times we accept people who are saying nasty things online and in videos and in music. We accept it as if they're not talking trash, as if they're not talking filth. And we accept those messages and we listen to them, we sing, and then we put them up as heroes, as if morality doesn't matter. And we let our children listen to them. We let our children almost mantra and almost be meditating on things that are saying very negative, very bad things. And we don't say anything about it. And then we get surprised when our children act like the songs that they listen to. Because music makes a difference. We get surprised when you understand it is in the Shabaka Stone, which you talk about. It said, hearing, and seeing all feed into your heart. And they make every belief come forth. So what you see with your eyes and what you develop in your heart, what you speak with your tongue is going to make the truth come out. But what you hear and what you see are going to feed into your heart, and they're going to develop your beliefs. And we allow ourselves to hear filth, to watch filth on TV, to watch filth on movies and things of that nature, and get surprised when we have filthy and oriented beliefs. And then when something challenging happens, we don't have the same coping mechanisms that our ancestors had, where they could deal with a lot more when they were literally facing death's door and had to overcome that so that you could live, so that I could live. I mean, it's remarkable stuff we're talking about. We have to take the same fortitude, the same attitude, the same everything that our ancestors had internally, and develop that and really divide it up, right? Cut it up, look at it, put it in ourselves, and allow us to address the things that we're dealing with today. So whatever their attitudes were with their how did they do that? We need to apply that to our situations today. We can't simply just look at this and not say that, our ancestors did amazing things, but they did it in this way. This is how they did it. And I think that what I see now, I see opportunity. Yes, it's challenging, and every generation has their challenge, but this cannot break you. I mean, if you think about the Montgomery Boyce boycott was amazing, and that Rosa Parks and Charles Houston and people like, Thurgood Marshall and people like, Harry, all kinds of people, Harry Moore and Ida B. Wells and various. If you think about all those people and all the things they went through, we cannot absolutely think that this is going to defeat us. We cannot allow it to be in any way to shake us. We must know that that means whenever you have a big challenge, there's a big reward on the other side. And hopefully that reward is for all people. It's for our family. It's for our communities. Hopefully that's what that reward is for. It's for us. It makes you go stronger. It's an opportunity to go stronger. So I just wanted to share it. I'd love to see what you think down below. I'd love to see your answers to it. I'd love to see us think about what really made people like Sojourner Truth strong. What really made someone like Sahure, or what really made the Khufu and the pyramids. What made these things significant? What made them strong? What made them last? What made them last for thousands of years? What made the societies last for thousands of years? And what made people like the people who faced that craziness in Wilmington, North Carolina in November in Wilmington, North Carolina years ago, what made them face that and still be able to give birth to you and I? So God bless you. I pray that I hear your thoughts, you share them below. And I'm going to be coming back with more because I think we need specific coping mechanisms. And I think it begins with our purpose and our prayer and our divinity. So I'd like to share that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to be coming at you with much more. Talk to you soon.